Music from the Smug Brothers right there. That's from On the Way to the Punchline. That's their latest release. Before that, we heard Jim James with a track from Regions of Light and Sounds of God. That was State of the Art. AEIOU. They Might Be Giants before that with a track from Nanobots. That's their newest album. It's called Tesla. Well, I am Juliet Fromhold, and I have to welcome into the studio somebody who has had a long history with the show, and probably, I don't know if you remember that you had kind of a hand in the very, very early days of Kaleidoscope. I want to welcome Jason Young to the studio.
Good evening.
Hello. Very happy to have you here. So to explain to everybody, I just posted a picture on our Facebook page, and it was the very original logo for the show. Yeah.
That old thing.
Yeah. Back 4.5 some years ago when we were switching from Evening Excursions to calling the show Kaleidoscope, after agonizing over a name for about 4.5 months before the show started proper, I finally, I always have to give props to Norm Whitman's wife for helping me come up with a name. We came up with Kaleidoscope, and I approached a good friend of mine who happens to be a wonderful artist and said, could you make me a logo? And that was your logo.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I do remember that, actually. I was looking at the logo the other day, and I was like, this is cool, but I was like, I think I could do better now.
Well, let's go back. Let's start off. I know that you've been drawing for a long time. Was making art just something that has always been a part of you, or can you pinpoint kind of a start to when you said, yeah, I want to be an artist, I want to draw?
Yeah, I think it was forever, because me and my brother used to always draw our own comics when we were kids, like in the church bulletins at church or just on whatever paper we had. So yeah, I think as long as I could hold a pencil, pretty much.
And when you guys were drawing your own comic books, was it sort of, your own original characters, or were you kind of riffing off of characters that you had been reading about? How did you start out? What were your first creations like?
I think they were mostly just stuff we were making up at the time, but I can remember my brother, because he's more of an entrepreneur than I am, and I remember him selling me some of his comics that he would create himself. And then years later, I look back and I'm like, wait a minute, those are Marvel characters. He's just looking at old comics and redrawing them and selling them to me. So he was maybe a little smarter about it than I was, but we were both pretty creative, I guess.
So that's awesome. So he was just selling you his books. That's awesome.
Like the Ghost Rider or something. Like, wow, you created the Ghost Rider. That's amazing.
When did you decide to really start? Were these early creations about your life, or when did you start to? Your comics are so autobiographical. When did that start? Was that a later decision or an early decision?
Yeah, I think because again, my brother, he's a few years older than me, and he was reading comics as long as I can remember, since I was born, and he turned me on to like Chester Brown and a couple other people that do auto-bio stuff. But I do remember, like, when we were kids, we drew our own books about ourselves too. So like one was just about us playing basketball with our friends and things like that. So I think I've always been interested in just like sharing personal stories with people. So I think it's a really intimate sort of genre of comics.
And you're doing that now in your series Veggie Dog Saturn. Tell me a little bit about how that got started.
Let's see. I think I did a comic called Panic Attack years ago, and I just never continued with it. But I wanted to do more autobio stuff, and I kind of found a different voice and a different approach. And one summer I just kind of wrote the first issue, and when my friend Eric encouraged me to get it printed up and get it into people's hands to read it. So from that, it just kind of snowballed, and every year I've done one or two since then.
When you were doing that first one, did you envision it being an ongoing book, or did you think, oh, I'm just going to do this one and get it out there? And
yeah, I think it was just a one-off thing in my mind, because it was pretty much about a bad experience I had that I needed to have some sort of catharsis and get it out of my system, and it was a really really good way to just, like cleanse my palate of that whole affair. And yeah, I recommend that to anyone. Like, instead of just doing a painting or whatever, you can tell a story, and it's kind of like, writing it in your diary, but it's artwork too, and you can share it with people that way.
What is your process like, as far as getting, planning out the story and as far as beginning, middle, and end, and then actually drawing out the story? Is it all kind of happening at once? Are you plotting out the story fully in your head and then, figuring out how the paneling is going to work?
I usually just start with like just a nugget of an idea, like, oh, that's a fun story, or something really strange that has happened. And I just write, like, I keep a list of like possible story ideas, and then whenever I'm getting ready to make another comic, I look through it, and whichever one just strikes my interest at the time, really, like, because some of them are kind of dark and some of them are kind of funny, and then, I don't know, they're really different from each other. So yeah, it just depends on what mood I'm in, and then I just kind of sit down and write down the main like points that I want to get across, like, story elements or whatever. And then I just kind of go with it. I just kind of like wing it and, just sketch it out like with stickman people, and just kind of see how it turns out. And then once I get sort of, wrangled into a form I want, I just go for it.
Now, the Jason character, you in Veggie Dog Saturn, I feel like is becoming, he's like the icon of the book, and he's very recognizable to me, having read all of the books. Was that something? Did you have that character sort of developed, the look of that character, long before Veggie Dog Saturn started, or did you sort of develop the way the you was looking in the comic book for that first Veggie Dog?
I think it took me until issue 4 before it starts looking consistent. Actually, in issue 4 has like a lot of flashbacks to when I was a kid, so that's even a little different. But yeah, like the first 2 or 3 issues, I think it's hardly recognizable as the same character from issue to issue. But after that, yeah, I pretty much draw myself the same way. And I kind of found, it's like when you look at old, Peanuts cartoons, not that I'm comparing this to Peanuts, but Peanuts is clearly a lot better. But yeah, I mean, if you look at like, the 50s Charlie Brown, it looks nothing like the 80s or 90s Charlie Brown. And, I think I just finally figured out what I wanted to make myself look like, and to get it across as like a nice cartoon. And yeah, I'm kind of finally happy with it.
Is that hard to not only, be putting putting something that you've drawn, something that you've created out there, but to also have it be, stories of your life, stories that can be very funny, but can also be kind of heartbreaking or dark. Right. Is that difficult when you're putting a book out there?
I try not to think of it that way, because I think all artwork, whether it's music or whatever, you're putting part of yourself in there, but when it is so like literal transcribed of your life, it does make me think twice a couple times. Like, there's a couple of stories I've put out there where I'm like, I hope this one person doesn't read this, because it kind of like shows something that they did that. And I'm not trying to paint anyone to be a villain, but I just put things that happen, and if someone does something horrendous, I put it in there. I don't edit it. Like there was a something in the second issue where someone did something that like is kind of despicable to me, and I like thought whether I should edit it or lighten it up a little bit, and I was like, no, I'm just gonna put it in there, and I used his real name and everything, and so far as I know, he hasn't seen it, so we'll see what happens when his lawyer calls me, I guess.
What's it been like to have, maybe not those extremes, but your friends and people in your life who are in the books and are seeing themselves portrayed, or were along for them in some of these situations? What's it like to have their reactions?
It's really cool. I think most people I guess it's flattering to see yourself in a piece of artwork, because the artist is thinking about you. And I think most people like it. Most of my friends like, when they appear in my book. Like, one of my friends who's never appeared in one of them, he keeps asking me, he's like, when am I going to be in an issue? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to think of like the perfect story that involves you. So yeah, I think most people dig it.
Cool. Now, you have been going to, some of these independent comic conventions. There's Space up in Columbus. There's TCAF in Toronto. And I know that at Space, your work has been honored several times over the years. What has the community of independent creators been like? For those who don't know, both Space and TCAF are pretty much devoted to independent comic creators, small press people, things like that. What have you found in that community of folks that are gathering at these events?
It's awesome. I mean, it's super diverse, and I've met a lot of people that I've actually ended up working with on comics. And yeah, I mean, it's a great way to, I don't know, to kind of network and just to get inspired. I've seen stuff that makes me rethink the way I'm doing things, and everyone's so approachable. I mean, you can ask them, be like, well, why do you do it this way? Or like, do you have any advice? And everybody's really forthcoming with everything. So yeah, it's almost like a punk rock community where everybody's just kind of like, yeah, you want to start a band? Let's start a band next weekend, and we jam on a comic together, and it's super fun. And there's a lot of creative energy there.
Now, explain to people what a jam comic is, because I love this concept, and I've seen them kind of happening. The last time I was up at Space, you guys were, I think, several people were working on one, kind of passing one around.
Yeah.
Tell people about that. I love this.
Well, this is cool too, because this is the main way me and my brother and our friends did our comics when we were kids. Basically, somebody just starts with a blank sheet of paper, and they just draw the first panel and like write in the words, and then just hands it to somebody else, and they have no idea, like where the story's supposed to go, and they just continue it with another panel, and then passes it to somebody else, and it's so cool to watch it meld into like different styles and different story ideas. Occasionally it'll go in a direction you're like, what? This is crazy, but that's all part of the fun. I mean, just seeing where it goes.
It reminds me a lot of like improv sketch comedy, where
Right.
when you're working with different people, you have to be kind of, the rules of improv are like, you have to be willing to say yes and yes and sort of, advance the story.
Right. Yeah. You can't be like, well, I don't like the idea that all of a sudden this guy's a pirate. I'm going to change it to, he's just a regular guy again. Like, yeah, you have to just take whatever they hand you and just kind of not really, think too logically about it, but just kind of go with it. And I think that's, where a lot of spontaneity comes into play and makes for good comics.
Now, we talked a little bit about your writing process for Veggie Dog Saturn, but what's kind of your regimen? I mean, are you drawing all the time? Do you go in spurts? Do you sort of set a schedule for yourself?
I wish I was drawing all the time. Right now I work 2 part-time jobs. So I basically have 1 day a week where I set aside to draw. And then I have a couple times a week where, like me and Eric do a drawing night once a week. But like Tuesday is my, I don't make plans day, and I just kind of stay at home and draw. So unfortunately right now I'm a 1 day a week, cartoonist. So I would love to be a 7 day a week cartoonist.
Does it take, is it rough sometimes when you say, okay, like, this is my drawing night? Do you have nights where you sit down and you're just like, oh my gosh, nothing's coming, and you force yourself to work through it, or is it kind of one of those things where this is my 1 day, I have to get it all out now?
Oh, it's a perfect amalgam of those two things. Like sometimes I'll show up to my friend Eric's house, and we, our goal is to just draw for 4 hours, and sometimes I stare at a blank piece of paper for an hour and a half, and I realize my creative, my wheels aren't turning. So I just at that point I just start sketching whatever. I feel like, any kind of drawing is better than no drawing. So I honestly try to draw something every day, whether it's a sketch or part of a comic or whatever. So yeah, if the wheels aren't turning, you just do it anyway. You just start sketching, and you're like, this is terrible, but at least it's getting my creative juices flowing.
Who are some artists? You mentioned Chester Brown. Who are some creators or artists that really inspire you?
Well, it's weird. Over the years, obviously when I was a kid, it was superhero comics, and I have nothing against superhero comics now. I feel like I've read so many of them, like literally thousands of them, that I'm kind of not as interested in them anymore. But Jack Kirby, who did most of the Marvel comics in the 60s that anyone's ever heard of, he basically drew all those, and him, and then in the late 80s, I learned about Chester Brown and that whole genre of like underground cartoonists like Charles Burns and now like Jeffrey Brown and Kerry McNinch and all these people that do great auto-bio stuff, because that's what I'm most interested in. So I kind of take a lot of inspiration from that whole crew.
Do you find that the sort of auto-bio comic world is, although it's very accessible creator to creator, that it's kind of hard for people to find it, or people don't know it's out there?
Yeah, I mean, probably in your average comic shop, there's not a lot of it there because it's not a huge seller, or at least in most places I've been to. I mean, in Chicago and Toronto, it's pretty big. But like, we carry a lot of it at the store I work at, and it doesn't sell great, but the people that like it really like it. And I think most of them find it through going to conventions or just kind of stumbling across it on the web, because a lot of these people do web comics or at least blog posts on a weekly basis. So yeah, I don't know. I think I was just lucky to have an older brother who really knew what was going on. It's like when you have an older brother that turns you on to like really awesome movies or music. I feel like I had the same thing, and I don't know how most people find out about it, honestly, because they're usually like hand stapled, folded black and white kind of zine kind of comics, and most stores don't give those the most prominent store space. So yeah, you kind of have to dig around for them.
Kind of have to have an in, or it's kind of like if you don't have that older brother scenario, you have to have kind of, I feel like, somebody who acts as the older brother, who in the same way that somebody says, oh, you have to listen to this record,
right.
There's somebody that says, oh, you have to read this book.
And that's why we're here tonight.
And that is why we're here tonight.
We're your older brother, people.
That's right. Your radio older brother. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk more with Jason Young about his work. And we've got a special guest who happened to stop by the studio. We're going to bring him in the studio as well. We're talking independent comics here on Kaleidoscope on 91.3 WYSO. Here's some music. Stay tuned. Lots more to come.
Did you ever find out something about someone? Something shocking, terrible, disgusting, and then file that information away just in case it proves handy later on? On the next Snap Judgment, from PRX and NPR, we proudly present The Dirt. Snap Judgment. Storytelling with a beat. Do not miss it.
Thursday night at 11 and Sunday night at midnight. Where else but Why So?
We're back here on Kaleidoscope on 91.3 WYSO. I'm Juliet from Holt, joined here in the studio once again by Jason Young.
Hi.
Hi. And we've got another guest who came along today, another independent comic creator, Brian John Mitchell. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you here.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Now, Jason, I want to talk about this new book that you've got coming out. Is this your first, formal foray into doing fiction?
It's the first one I'm proud of. So yeah, we'll say it's the first one.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Was it a hard stretch, or was it a different kind of creative process to write a fictional book as opposed to, autobiographical?
It was definitely different, but I think I was kind of excited about it because as much as I like talking about me, I was like, I don't know. I think I've got some other stories, some things that didn't actually happen to me. So, I've been wanting to do something fiction for a while. And then I talked to my friend Chris Hoyam, and we decided to, work on a book together where we wrote for each other and made this collaboration of fiction. And I was really happy with the way it turned out.
In collaborating with other folks, differently than, say, a jam comic, when you're writing for somebody else to draw, do you take into consideration their style when you're formulating the story? How does that work?
Definitely, yeah. Like Chris has a style that's similar to my own, but it's got its different strengths too. So I tried to write it based on what I thought would look great for him to do. And yeah, I think you have to take that into consideration, because some people's styles are so different. There was an issue of Veggie Dog Saturn that was all drawn by other people. That I wrote all the stories and other people drew them, and I tried to specifically pick such stuff that would work well with each person's artistic style. So yeah, it's definitely in my mind when I decided who does what. Was that issue?
Was that strange for you to then see, when it's your stories, your autobiographical stories in somebody else's style?
Yeah, it was kind of strange, but it ended up being my favorite issue of the series because it was so different. Because I love comics anthologies. That's probably my favorite thing to buy, other than mini comics, is anthologies, because you just never know what you're going to get. It's so all over the place, and it was really cool to see, my stuff turned into other people's versions of me.
And Brian, I want to bring you into the conversation. Now, I met you at Space this past year, and you have these tiny little comics that you're putting
they're
out.
The size of a pack of matches, basically, and only one panel fits per page, and they're like 30 to 50 pages or so. And I do a bunch of different genres. I do the autobio thing that is typical of mini comics, but then I also do like westerns and horror and just whatever comes to mind. I'll try and tackle a topic.
Now, I have to ask, when you're doing the artwork for those, are they drawn that size, or are they sized down?
It depends. Like, I started out drawing it that size, and I think you can tell a little bit. And then now the ones that I do that are just stick figures, the autobio stuff, I do it just slightly larger, like maybe at like 30% larger. But ones I do that are really drawn are probably about 4 to 6 times the size. And depending on the artist, because I only draw maybe a third of the comics that I do, and the artists that draw the other ones, some of them draw it pretty close to the actual size, and some of them draw it like a full sheet of paper reduces down to the size of a matchbook, and sometimes that doesn't really work out because they have all this cross hatching, and it just turns into white when you shrink it down that much, or just black, whichever.
How do you determine like what you're going to draw and what you're going to have other people draw? Do people pitch ideas to you? Do you kind of meet up with people and say, "Hey, work with me"? Or
well, it's a lot of it is like you meet the people at the conventions and stuff, and it's like Jason was saying, it's a pretty tight knit community. And you meet somebody and you're like, "Oh, I want to work with them," and you just talk about ideas of things that they want to draw, and you get ideas like, okay, so because I have like a bunch of stories just laying around that I don't have anybody that I think would be the right person to draw them, and I just need to find the right person to draw those stories a lot of the time. And it's like you see somebody's art and you're like, oh, this person would be really cool for doing this idea that I have, and you see if they're interested in that idea, and if they are, then you're like, okay, let's go. Here's a script.
Is it tricky, sort of spanning the different genres from, autobio to horror to Western? Do you have to sort of put yourself in a different writing mindset to get to those different stories?
Well, I think you do in a way, but like what happens with me personally, I don't sit down like I am going to write something that's in this style. Like it's just like stuff's ruminating forever, and then like it might take me like 2 or 3 years to write down a script, and then even after I write it down, it might be another year before I do the final version that's going to somebody so that they can draw it, because it's just the nature of things with mini comics is nobody's making money. So
ain't that the truth?
So you send somebody a script and you're like, finish it when you get a chance. So 2 years sometimes passes before the art comes back, and if it hasn't come back in 2 years, usually you ask somebody else to do it, and then there's another 2 years.
We're talking independent comics with Jason Young and Brian John Mitchell here on Kaleidoscope on 91.3 WYSO, Yellow Springs, Dayton, Springfield, and online at wyso.org. In talking about, there's not a lot of money, just like, in independent music, nobody's generally knocking down your door saying, hey, make this art. How do you guys get your work out there? We talked a little bit about the conventions, but are you networking online? Is it mostly person to person?
I had a lot of luck last year with Kickstarter, that I was trying to get like $500 to buy these wooden boxes to make box sets, and I got like $2,000 in backers. So, and my books sell for $1 a piece, so $2,000 is more than 2,000 books sold. So that was like a pretty big deal. And then I did this other one about Jason actually collaborated on one of them that I did these.
We play well together.
Yeah, I did these set of 3 comics that they were in. The stories were like semi-horror stories involving bottles, and I put the comics in bottles and I threw them out in the ocean. And
did you get a nasty letter from a park ranger?
I got a nasty letter from a park ranger.
Oh, wow.
A park ranger found one of my bottles and said that I was littering.
Oh no.
But that means they broke it open to get the contact information. Right. So hopefully they read them.
Right.
So that's a win.
Yeah.
I was going to say that really says something, that they didn't just recycle the bottle.
Yeah, they didn't just throw it away. Yeah. They took the time to tell me I was a bad person.
I'm going to save the world.
Wow.
But like in that one, I got some luck with that on Kickstarter. I think right now for indie comics, Kickstarter's not quite as hot as it was maybe a year ago, because the same with music. There's that thing going with Kickstarter where people are starting to be burned a few times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
With people not completing their projects or not completing them anywhere close to on time or whatever, like that grizzly bear dude's story.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Do you think that in that regard, it's one of those situations where the crowdfunding thing was working really well, but now, maybe there's a different way to crowdfund, or artists are going to have to sort of look for the next thing? Like Kickstarter was the next thing, certainly for a while, but now, it's reaching critical mass, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the problem I have with a lot of people's Kickstarters is people do these Kickstarters and they don't really know how much work it is to do their project, and they don't know how much money it's really going to take to do this project. They don't calculate in like all the things that can go wrong. And I wish that when people were doing their Kickstarters, it was like, this product is already done. I want to know if I should bother to manufacture it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Which that's the way I'm using Kickstarter, is like I'm like, the product is ready. if I should let me know if I should invest $500 to make this thing exist. If there aren't 500 people that want to spend $1, then I know not to bother to make it.
Right. Do you print 20 or 2,000?
Yeah.
That's when you find out.
Yeah, which I think is a good way to use it. But then, like, you know, other people are like writing like I don't even think they have the script done. They're just like, here's a pitch, and I got somebody to draw a splash page, and they said they'd draw the whole thing if I give them $10,000.
Right.
And so, guys, I need $25,000. I'm like, wow, that's a big ask, $25,000.
Yeah.
For somebody that we've never heard of.
Right.
How do you sort of figure out, especially with these things like the comics in a bottle and the box sets and things like that, how do you sort of determine what is, doable, or even when you're putting together the Kickstarter, like what's going to be potentially fundable, like what's going to draw people in, or Jason, like with your covers, that are really just different and eye-catching and unique. How do you sort of balance the art side of things with maybe a little touch of marketing?
I'm really bad at marketing. Like I have no online presence. I mean, there's a website, but I don't do like Facebook or anything. I try to I mail my comics to different stores that I know will sell them on consignment, and then anytime I'm out of town, I'll take a big stack with me, and if I find a comic shop or a comics convention, I'll give them to people or try to sell them or get them on consignment. So I'm kind of bad beyond that about getting my stuff out there. I think Brian is much more in tune with how to...
Jason hired me to promote his books a couple times. Yeah, I mean, I am... With the Kickstarter, it's funny, like the one with the box set, I actually ran into a problem because, like, I was looking for $500, and when I got $2,000, it was like, oh, I don't have time to physically make these things. It went from something that was going to take a week of my life to something that took a month of my life.
Right.
And so, like, I needed to push a bunch of other work that I was needing to do aside for a while to do that, which, I mean, like, that's awesome in a way.
Yeah.
But it's like, like the folding and stapling part of comics isn't really...
That's my favorite part. It really is. Like when I get them printed up, they're like, and it's only like $2 extra for us to fold and staple. I'm like, no, don't you dare rob me of that joy.
But yeah, I mean, like Kickstarter for me was lucky because I have built up a database over the past several years where like I have all these people that are press people for comics, and so like I would put up the Kickstarter and then I would email these 70 or 80 people, and hopefully some of them would give it coverage. And with the bottle thing, it was funny because they were like, there are only like 3 or 4 major comics news sites, and one of them like emailed me right back and they were like, this is littering and we don't want to promote this. But then the other 3 covered it, so then the 4th one had to.
Right.
Peer pressure.
So, I mean, like, but it's funny because you'd think, oh, you get all this coverage, but actually, like, because I'm kind of a numbers person, and like I was look at the numbers, and those sites don't drive that many. Like, Kickstarter is really good about showing you where your money comes from, and most of the money comes from people that are just on Kickstarter and just like looking for something cool to put some money towards. That's where I got most of my money. Other people I know that did Kickstarter projects, that wasn't their experience at all.
Unless they heard about it on the news site and just later were like, oh, I'm going to troll around on Kickstarter.
Yeah. I mean, that's possible. They heard about it, and then later when they were on Kickstarter, they're like, oh, yeah, I heard about that. I mean, you can't...
It's hard to know for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure exactly how it works, but it's not like you get listed on this site and immediately...
Right, you're a rich man.
But, I mean, to me, the even more disconcerting thing is, you email to your 100 friends or whatever about like, hey, I'm doing this Kickstarter if you want to buy my new book, and that only 7 of them. They're like, I'll just get it at
he'll
the
give it to me for free.
Yeah, and like I was doing this album thing that was going to require me buying some new audio equipment, and it didn't get funded, and people were like, so how's it working on that new album? I'm like, it's not going to happen because I didn't get the money to buy the equipment. And people are like, oh, I thought you'd just do it anyway, so that's why I didn't bother to back it. I'm like, well, that's not how it works. Like, you know, so it's a double-edged sword a little bit.
I want to kind of ask you guys both what you think, since we're kind of on this Kickstarter conversation. You mentioned people that are just on Kickstarter and looking for something cool. It seems to me that some of these crowdfunding sites have sort of maybe reinvigorated sort of the old idea of a patron for the arts and put it more on a DIY level, or made it more accessible to people who aren't, you know, rich enough to be a, say, patron of the fine arts, but everyday people who want to be supporters. As artists, have you guys seen that either, you know, through crowdfunding or just through, you know, what you're seeing at conventions? You know, maybe people who aren't creators, but, you know, and maybe aren't even huge comic fans, but just want something different and want to support art and creation.
Yeah, I mean, most of the people I've sold to at conventions are definitely comic book readers. But I've never done, you know, there's other shows like I really need to, I need to do the Second Street Market or something like, you know, something like that where there's just all kinds of different things to buy and seek out. But yeah, so far I think I would wager 100% of the people that have bought them from me are comic book readers or my friends.
Yeah, but they're at comic conventions and comic shops. So
right. Yeah.
There's that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I actually, they do, I don't know if you know Maker Faire. Anyway, they do a local one in the city where I live, and every year that's my biggest single selling event. You know, I did it a couple weeks ago, and I sold $200 worth of $1 books.
Wow.
You know,
that's almost like 200 of them. I'm quick with math.
Yeah. And so it's just like, okay, this is, you know, and it's like all people that just are like wandering around, and you're, you know.
That's great.
And I want to try and, you know, it's like the craft fair market and that stuff, though. It's really weird. You need to just, it's like you need to go to those individual events to know if it's going to work. Because, like, you go to some of them and the only thing that sells is jewelry and pottery or, you know, whatever. So you just need to, I mean, I know, Steve Bissett? He said he sells a lot of stuff at the farmer's market.
Wow.
But he does he did that book about like
dinosaurs.
Yeah, or dinosaurs or local. No, it was like local ghost stories or something.
Right.
And he said like he sells to tons of that
to people are interested in the town stories.
Yeah, just localized. But as far as like with Kickstarter and the Patron of the Arts thing, I do think there's something going on where some people are realizing that the way that the arts are right now, especially like the music and comics industry, where there's not a lot of money going on, that if you want there to continue to be new work, you need to somehow pay in towards it. And Kickstarter is a good place to get that opportunity to make sure new work happens. And it's a good discovery engine. And right now, I mean, like years ago, MySpace was a great discovery engine for pretty much anything artistic. And when it fell to Facebook's just a totally different type of community. I don't have any problems with it, but it's not good for art discovery. And right now, Kickstarter's the best art discovery thing, but as it's just gotten diluted as there get to be too many projects, it's harder to discover quality projects when you're just inundated.
Do you do Etsy? Do you do that one?
I don't. I hear good things, but I'm just like, you know, where do you only have so much time. What are you going to invest it in?
Well, where can people get their hands on both of your comics?
You can get both of them at Mavericks and Kettering. We sell Brian's Silver Media stuff at Mavericks and mine too. Or you can, I mean, I sell them through the mail. You can go to my website, which is buyerbeware.guttertrash.net. And some other comic shops carry them. Like I know some stores in Chicago and things carry them. So you can find them if you sniff them out.
Yeah, it's funny because I think Mavericks is the only comic shop I currently have stuff in.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, they're so small in places where like, I don't know, because, like...
They're going to get lost and
They're going
stolen.
to get lost. They're going to get stolen. We aren't going to be able to keep track of them. So I'm like, okay, don't worry about it. Then you don't take them in.
They are tiny, but I like them because they're tiny.
They're super cute. They're super
I
cute.
mean, like,
I have 3 in my pocket. Today, this is a true story, because I work at Maverick's comic book shop. Today was New Comic Book Day, and one of our customers came in, and he was buying a big pile of regular-sized comics. And he was like, yeah, I got to go back to work. I got a big meeting. And I was like, oh, you're going to try to sneak some of those in and read them? And he goes, no, I can't do that. And I pulled out, I had some of Brian's comics in my pocket, which I often do. And I was like, check out these little tiny little things. Like, you can sneak these into any meeting. So there's some
Added appeal.
Right there.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that was part of the whole thing when I started doing this format. It was something you can read on your bus ride. You can read it, you can just have it with you and read it wherever, whenever, including your business meeting is cool.
Yeah, they're really discreet.
Yeah. If you're lucky.
Yeah.
And the website for if you want to order mine direct is Silber Media with B as in boy for SILB as in boy, ERMEDIA.com. And if you want to just go to the comics, it's /comics. There's a ton of stuff up there.
And we'll get a link up to that on our Facebook page. We've got a link up to Jason's site already. We'll get Brian's up there as well. We're facebook.com/Kaleidoscope Radio. And Jason, I understand you brought some goodies for a lucky listener.
Yeah, I brought some funny books to give away.
Oh, all righty. Well, let's... what number caller shall we do?
3.
3? Okay. All right. Caller 3 at 937-769-1998 wins some comics, some independent comics from our good buddy Jason Young here. And we've got Brian's in there too. Awesome.
I'll go with caller number 5.
Okay.
Sorry, caller number 4. You're just out of luck.
3 and 5. All right. Callers 3 and 5. 937-769-1998. Check it out. We are going to have links up on our Facebook page to both of these guys' work. Support independent art. Long story short, do it. It's worth it. Thank you both so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you very much, Juliet.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. 937-769-1998. Third and fifth callers win some goodies. Give us a call, won't you? Here's music from Met City. This is Kaleidoscope.